This week, we welcome Eric Woodruff, Product Technical Specialist at Semperis, to discuss Silver SAML, Golden SAML in the cloud. In the Leadership and Communications section, the board's pivotal role in steering cybersecurity, CISO CEO communications gaps continue to undermine cybersecurity, the essence of integrity and leadership, a pillar of trust and excellence, and more. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly. Why is identity resilience a top priority for security executives? Because your identity access management, or IAM system, is critical to your business. Whether you use Okta, Microsoft Entra, or another IDP, if your IAM is attacked, your operations can go down for hours or days, directly impacting your bottom line. So what's your backup plan? Mighty ID is here to save the day, reinforcing your IAM resilience. With flexible backup and recovery, and even migration between IDPs, Mighty ID keeps business running when failure is not an option. Check out Mighty ID at securityweekly.com/Mighty ID for more. Let's talk about something that's becoming increasingly important for enterprise companies worldwide: cyber risk management. Traditionally, cyber risk has been managed manually in silos, separate from the business's core operations. The future is about getting real-time risk insights benchmarked against your industry peers through automation. And CyberSaint's CyberStrong platform is leading the charge. CyberStrong is not just another point solution. It's a revolutionary platform. It's a quantified top-down risk approach where your unique cyber risks inform C-suite decision-making to identify your top 5 cyber risks and the controls to mitigate them. Sign up for your free cyber risk analysis by visiting securityweekly.com/CyberSaint. High-value employees have become the path of least resistance and a key source of compromise for corporations. Attacks against executives can compromise their personal accounts, enable corporate breaches, and can even compromise their reputation, wealth, and physical security. BlackCloak understands that an executive's personal digital footprint is crucial to enterprise security. We provide concierge cybersecurity solutions tailored for executives, safeguarding their personal data, devices, and online presence. Experience peace of mind knowing that your team is protected with BlackCloak Digital Executive Protection. Secure your digital life with BlackCloak.io. Visit us now at securityweekly.com/BlackCloak. Welcome to Business Security Weekly. This is episode number 348, recorded April 29th, 2024. I am your host, Matt Alderman. Joining remotely for this segment today are my co-hosts. First, Mr. Jason Albuquerque. How you doing, Jason?
I'm doing well. I kept an eye on the draft. We scored a quarterback from North Carolina, Mr. Drake May. And we did pretty well. It's good to finally see the Patriots start spending some money and some time in the draft instead of just always trading it away. So refreshing.
Yeah, I'm waiting to see the post analysis of all the 3 different teams I tracked to be like,
right.
All right, who actually won in the draft and who didn't. So TBD. Also joining from the great state of Texas, Mr. Ben Carr. Hey, Ben.
What? Nice to be with you here again on this fine week. Look forward to jumping into some good articles and some discussion here.
Yeah, this is a week before RSA conference. So Security Weekly listeners, you can still save $100 on your RSA Conference 2024 full conference pass. RSA conference will take place next week, May 6th to May 9th in San Francisco and on demand. To register using our discount code, please visit securityweekly.com/RSAC24 and use the code 54USECWeekly. We hope to see you there, and I hope you find a hotel room because they're a little expensive right now. On the evening of Monday, May 6, 2024, W2 Communications and Cyber Risk Alliance are bringing Cyber Tacos back to San Francisco. If eating free tacos, sipping on margaritas, and mingling with cyber professionals from all over the world sounds good to you, make sure to register to secure your spot. I think I'll be there. I'm planning to be there. Visit securityweekly.com/cyber tacos to RSVP today. This segment is sponsored by Semperis. To learn more, please visit securityweekly.com/Semperis. Throughout his 23-year career in information technology, Eric has sought out and held a diverse range of roles, including technical manager in the public sector, senior premier field engineer at Microsoft, and security and identity architect in the Microsoft partner ecosystem. Currently, he serves as the product technical specialist at Semperis, focusing on ITDR and cloud identity resilience. Eric is a Microsoft MVP for security, recognized for his expertise in the Microsoft identity ecosystem. Eric, welcome to Business Security Weekly.
Thanks, Matt, Ben, and Jason. Good to be here.
So we're going to talk about Silver SAML, which is a variation of the Golden SAML in the cloud. But I think for this audience, we should probably start with a foundation of what is Golden SAML?
Yeah, so, Golden SAML is a SAML response foraging attack. And you may say, well, what is that? But if you think of a lot of applications, your Salesforce, Workday, anything that's really SaaS, they either use OpenID Connect or SAML for authentication, right, to Entra ID or Okta. And Golden SAML is a way an attacker can essentially impersonate users by crafting a response that's sent to the application, but it's not actually legitimate. Nobody's actually really authenticated necessarily before that. So,
got it. And this is obviously used to try to do impersonation attacks for individuals. Now, does this mean you have to have access to the credentials beforehand? So they're trying to use a compromised credential that might be available on the dark web, for example?
Yeah, so unlike a lot of attacks where it's harvesting of credentials or phishing, it's replaying credentials or representations of them. With Golden SAML or SAML response foraging, you don't need those credentials. There's other things you need as an attacker, but it's one of the few attack types where you sort of can completely bypass the authentication process and just sort of go right at the application in question. So
interesting. So why is this foundational element of Golden SAML so important when we think about Silver SAML, which is the implementation of this attack now in the cloud, right?
Yeah. I guess I'll just say like a brief bit of history is right. Like, even when SAML was written as a standard, right, people kind of warned about the possibility of forging a response if you obtain certain key material. And Silver SAML really kind of was, I guess, a thought exploration, sort of post SolarWinds, which I know was, a few years back. But, at the time I was working at Microsoft and working with a lot of organizations in moving from like Active Directory Federation services, like on-prem identity systems to, Azure AD, which is now Entra ID. And, within that, I saw some sort of not ideal practices by enterprises for management of some of the private key material that is critical to protecting this authentication. And where this kind of intersects, I'd say, with the whole SolarWinds attack is right, Microsoft and then CISA kind of came out and they were like, we'll just move to the cloud and like, right, you're done, you're good, like nothing bad can ever happen again.
Eric, that solves everything. I've totally heard that moving to the cloud is just a panacea. And if you do that, like everything works.
Yeah, absolutely, Ben. There's nothing that's ever wrong with moving to the cloud. But you're right. This kind of just, I'll say, people didn't realize that there was more intricacies or depth to, I think, how the attack work, and people can kind of put themselves in a situation to still be vulnerable to it. So.
And now, Eric, so Golden SAML is an attack in the wild, but is Silver SAML an attack that you've seen in the wild, or is that still research?
No, Jason. So I've never seen it in the wild. I think it's based off of practices that I would see customers doing, right? Like, and I mean, I'll say it's right. I'm sending in a Teams message, like the private key, right? Which is sort of the thing you don't want attackers to get. I'm sending it to you in a Teams chat with the password for it. Right. And I would see this and I'd say to myself, well, like, right. Like if an attacker got this, bad things could happen. And sometimes right with customers, it could be difficult because you would warn them, but they'd be like, well, unless you can prove it, right? Like you're just sort of making stuff up. So
now your research was done against Entra, but this is something that could be an exploit path to any type of identity provider, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I would say because putting the name aside, whether it's like Golden SAML or Silver SAML, like that SAML response foraging is something that really any identity provider that serves up SAML as an authentication method could be theoretically vulnerable to.
So for folks who have, let's say, I don't know, a key vault where they're storing their secrets or their certificate management is taking place, is that a protection? Is that one of the protections that you would recommend against this, or is that still vulnerable as well?
No, so using a key vault, you still could potentially be vulnerable, and especially thinking of the Entra and Azure ecosystem, because again, just knowing what a lot of enterprises can look like sort of behind the scenes, many of the people that may be configuring authentication may also have rights within a key vault or the rights to give themselves rights to the key vault. And at that point, you're just like one step away from, it's just one little bit of extra work that an attacker may have to perform to get those. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, someone with global admin, domain admin, or someone who can manage the credentials, obviously would if that's compromised, then
all hope is lost.
All the whole vault is compromised, so it totally makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, Eric, you're talking about the malicious external hacker environment, but you could also use this maliciously as an insider, right? I mean, the scenario you initially laid out was somebody sent me the key and the password. Well, what if I'm somebody who's going to use that data internally? We've seen a rise of the malicious insider in leaking data out of systems. I would assume that this is very applicable internally because it's probably a little easier, users might be a little more naive with passing some of these key elements around via Slack or Teams or whatever, right?
Yeah, Matt, I think that's a great point that you still see a lot of people kind of putting aside insider threats. And also, especially during my time at Microsoft, one of the big things was like delegating, right? So instead of IT owning Salesforce, the Salesforce team at the company owns Salesforce, HR owns Workday, and you can give them permission in Entra to say, go configure SAML yourself. And yeah, I think to your point, right, they don't know what any of this means. They're just following a couple documents until, the two things line up and they're like, look, it works. So yeah, absolutely. I think there's room for insider threat there.
Yeah, because I see more and more of those types of insider attacks where anybody who got access to this could be vulnerable. So I guess the question is, we don't currently see it in the wild, but what are some of the things organizations should start thinking about to either minimize or protect themselves against this attack surfacing?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And honestly, this is where the fix is almost simple, at least in the Entra world of things, where you just don't use externally generated certificates. And when I say that, I get a lot of like, well, what are the other options? And there are some other options, but I've been trying to think of like a good analogy for this. And it's sort of like, right, if you have a house with a garage and you park your car in the garage and you're afraid that your car is going to get robbed, right? And you're like, well, we use, an alarm system on our house. So let's go put an alarm system on our garage, right? Because that's how we know how to secure things. And it's like, or you could just like not leave your car unlocked. And right into that, not leave your car unlocked. I grew up in rural New York or I didn't grow up in, but lived in for a while, areas where people would do these things, like just leaving cars unlocked, right? Like the point I'm circling around to is the prevention is like super simple here, right? You just don't use an external certificate. Let yourself use the one that Microsoft gives you, and you like, again, call it a day. So people overcomplicate things with alternatives. Sorry, I'm very passionate.
Yeah, but there's a reason why somebody's using the alternatives, right? Why are people using external certificate sources? What is lacking, or why would you not use the default Microsoft certificate?
Well, and this is where it's either subjective feelings, right? Like there's sort of this feeling, right, that like a self-signed or self-generated certificate is less secure, and right from a cryptography perspective, it's like, no, right? If it's SHA-256, it doesn't matter if I generated it or I got it from somewhere else. But the bigger problem is a lot of organizations don't really understand how SAML actually, works. And not that everyone needs to be an absolute expert in it, but just like right, with most certificate usage scenarios, like you think of browsing a web, right, with TLS, like the issue there you have, right, is like the clients are sort of all unknown, and you need a way to easily say, right, like don't trust this website anymore, or the certificate used for this site. Uh, with SAML, you kind of go through this process where, like, you or me or the administrator is like that trust anchor. And in this configuration sort of scenario, the person is right, sort of trusted to pass the key material from one system to the other. But I think the bigger part is that if you use the Microsoft signed self-generated certificate, the private key can't be exported. So the thing that the attacker needs, like, nobody can get their hands on. Right, where it goes back to, if I am using something external, you have to manage the private key to upload it into Entra, right? And in whatever that gap is, whether it's big or small, that it's being handled by other people, right? That's like unnecessary exposure that doesn't provide any actual security benefit.
Yeah, I think that there's a perception, though, that it does, right? There's a lot of customers that actually think, oh, I need to maintain my own key. I can't leave that to Microsoft. So as a result, they're actually compromising their security by making a choice they think is more secure.
Yeah, absolutely, Ben.
I mean, Ben, I've also seen it as an easy button, where a developer says, I'm going to issue a self-signed cert because it's quick, it's convenient, and I don't have to go to anybody for money or approval or whatever the case may be. And then that's what just continues to stay, is that self-signed cert. So I've seen it used more often as an easy button, to be honest with you.
And right, like, honestly, like 99% of the time, right, all the use cases where we use externally generated certificates are better because we're using, certificate revocation lists and there's validity to it, right? But like, certificates are just a thing, right? And the standard was written in a way where certificate management is done different, right? It needs certificates for signing, but the standard was written in a way where it doesn't need or use those common conventions. So, yeah, it's just a matter of people sort of being like, everything that we look at, right, must have the same practice applied to it, without sort of maybe digging in a little deeper and seeing it doesn't make sense some of the time. So,
yeah, I mean, for large enterprises that are using Microsoft, obviously this is a pretty simple fix. Are organizations that aren't using Entra ID in Azure for their directory also susceptible to these attacks? Because there are some, right? Like my company, we don't use Microsoft, so I don't have an Entra ID environment. Are those environments also susceptible to these attacks?
So I guess I can't say with authority in that I am not versed enough in, like, say, Okta or Ping or the others to be able to easily recall, at least in this conversation, what their options are for, self-generating certs, or if you have to import your own, right? But yeah, I definitely think in theory, again, if you have a situation where you're ever importing a private key for SAML response signing, it doesn't matter what the IDP is, that if you have an option to use an alternative where you can't get access to the private key, like that's your best route. So,
Eric, are there any ways that a malactor could forge the Microsoft certificate?
No, I mean, right. Like if you think of asymmetric cryptography, and I'm not like a deep expert in it, but right, primarily with private public key pairs, I don't even know how you would start to try to come up with forging like a copy of a private key, right? And most of these attacks, though, are going to look more like, right? It's if you think from an attacker's perspective, it's also much easier to just replace the key with another one potentially than.
And they could potentially have the same subject name of the key, correct?
Yeah, they
forge it
could,
to be a Microsoft Azure federated key or something like that.
Yeah, so I mean, they could use the same subject name, but the actual the private key itself is still always going to be unique. Sure.
So are there anything we can do proactively to alert toward that type of external malactor activity, right? I like to alert on behaviors that are anomalous in my environment. So are there alerts and audits that we could, have triggered if someone's in there messing around and catch them before they can do anything?
Yeah, Jason. So, I mean, there are things that you can look for. And so right at Semperis, one of our things is identity threat detection response, which is a whole lot of things in itself. But as we were doing the research, we, for our both free Purple Knight product and also for our paid for directory services protector, we looked at how can we alert customers to there being a potential surface area for attack here. So we do have an indicator within our product that we'll look for SAML integrations. Unfortunately, right now, it is not as robust as I'd personally like because there's limits in the audit data that Microsoft actually exposes. So, kind of from the security perspective, as you go back and forth with a vendor like Microsoft, you're always kind of doing this dance, right? Where, we talk to them about it. They're like, it's working as designed. And we're like, now sort of like, well, can you at least make logging a little better and auditing so we could have better metrics right around, some of the key material changes in SAML, which would, back to your point, though, allow you to have, I think, a very precise sort of alert saying, hey, right, this thing changed, are you aware of it? So.
Hey, Eric, don't you love that response from a vendor when it's working as designed and your response back is, yes, but I'm trying to tell you the design isn't what I'm expecting.
Or the telemetry. Can you please give me more telemetry? So at least I can alert.
Thank you for nothing. I appreciate that.
Oh, I mean, we have seen a lot of companies be created due to lack of protections in Azure AD, and now known as Entra, right? I mean, there's a market here for a reason, guys, right? If it were all good and buttoned up by the source, we wouldn't be having these conversations, obviously. So, I'm just curious, Eric. We've seen Microsoft have made improvements in certain areas with their products and more capabilities. Are you hopeful that you'll get some of these additional things to help you, build a better product for people to try to protect against these attacks?
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I'll say in general, just there's definitely gaps in auditing within Entra. And they're not always necessarily security gaps, but also operational things, maybe even more mundane, right? But I go change, the spelling of Ben's name and maybe it's not logged, right? And it's definitely difficult because, right, if you think of Active Directory, when you own sort of the whole stack, right, you can go at it from all these different angles. And with the cloud, you're sort of at the mercy of whatever your cloud provider, gives you in audit data. I definitely have hope, right, that it may take a while to sort of get Microsoft to come around. They've had some bad press lately as well, right? So kind of these different pressures coming in and maybe we'll get more logging available with more verbosity and all those other good things. So
now, Eric, is there anything? And I know it's pretty powerful if you know how to navigate it. Is there anything that we can pull back from the Graph API to give us better telemetry?
Yeah, Jason. So unfortunately, actually, there isn't. So when you look at certificates right now, again through Graph API, you cannot really discern if it was externally generated or if it was generated by Microsoft. And yeah, right. Either it's audit logging on an event, or if there was some sort of attribute to just at least say, right, whether this was external or Microsoft generated. And that's right. I mean, I have to believe, right, if you peel back one layer that we can't see as customers, that somewhere right on the back end they know or have this sort of telemetry. So, but yeah, unfortunately, not
Just
right now.
give it to me. Maybe it's in Sentinel. I have seen though where there are certain things that aren't available in the Graph API, for example, that could be available in Sentinel, Jason. So I don't know if you've ever looked at that. If there are,
I've never seen anything to this
anything.
level of detail in Sentinel getting pulled in for telemetry.
Got it.
Yeah, and I mean, ultimately, Sentinel, right, is pulling from either Azure
Graph.
or your Office 365, like whatever the unified logs are. Occasionally there's weird identity bits that will show up in like the Office or Microsoft 365 logs, but nothing for this.
So Eric, if people want to know if they're potentially exposed to this, is the recommendation to go download your free product and use it and kind of get an initial assessment? I mean, is that a good starting point to look for your potential exposure?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, the indicator right now is going to warn on all basically SAML integrations. So there is a certain challenge in both the technical bit of things. I would also say something that isn't just necessarily solved through a product would be like looking at your I guess I'd say business culture internally as well, or your IT culture, right? Like if you've historically done this stuff, right, you may not need something to tell you that you were doing it. But yeah, I mean, definitely running Purple Knight, it's free. It will tell you about this and a bunch of other things in Entra ID or Active Directory, and you could use it on either. So,
got it. It's a great recommendation. Ben, Jason, any additional questions for Eric while we have him?
Good to go on my side.
Oh, yeah, good.
Eric, thank you so much for joining us on Business Security Weekly.
Yeah, it's great to be here, guys.
To learn how to protect your hybrid workforce, please visit securityweekly.com/Semperis. We're going to take a quick break and then cover the leadership and communications articles for this week.